afternoon, depending on where you are.
All right, fantastic. So welcome, everybody. It is now just about 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and we're excited to start TagOne's 5th webinar on 2020 supply chain solutions for hemp and CBD, building trust in the marketplace. Couple overviews on the process. We certainly we'll be making time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. If you have questions, just post them in the Q&A section. We'll do our best to get to them. If we can't get to them all, then either Merril and I will get back to you with answers to your questions to the best of our ability. Also, if for some reason you need to leave a little bit early, or you wanted to share this information with one of your colleagues, or just read through it again, our contact information will be at the end of the webinar. Email me and I can get you a copy of the deck, and we will be recording this also for you guys to review and listen to, because hopefully we've got some great content. So let's get started. A little bit about our guest. Merril, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the food and cannabis industry and what led you to start your company, TraceTrust.
Thank you. So hello, I'm Merril. I am the co-founder and CEO of TraceTrust, and we make edibles credible. And what that actually means is that 5 years ago, my business partner and I came together with an extensive background in food and beverage, not only product development, but in manufacturing and food safety and HACCP trainings. And we really saw the emerging market of cannabis being the explosion of CBD and hemp coming down the road. But we definitely saw that as more states, and being in California, clearly we're headed towards recreational back at that point in time. We wanted to be a part of that. And we had come at it a variety of different ways, but in that process really saw that the fast rate of technology, and particularly around extraction methodologies and process, and that moving from small batch productions into commercial productions was really causing a very varied experience, and that we also knew that the new demographics of new and returning consumers was really going to want a predictable experience. If this was going to be something that they were going to incorporate into their lifestyle, their health and wellness plan, any of the above, not wanting to smoke or inhale anything, and clearly before the Vapegate issues, this was going to be a crux of it. And so we came together and very quickly realized that we wanted to be the leaders in that conversation, that we wanted to use our experience. And so it took up until 2019 to bring the world of cannabis and hemp into the world connection between food and beverage, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, nutraceuticals, but bringing those worlds together has finally emerged. And we have established certification programs that really validate all sources of ingredients for everything that goes into a finished product, but very much also around a manufacturer's ability to replicate their process, have good manufacturing processes. And in addition to that, we really look at the dose claims for a product, the instructions for use, how easy is that to understand, and then we have that validated by independent labs running our standard that we're looking to have adapted internationally. So that is us in a nutshell.
Awesome, which is no small amount. And I think in essence, the concept that a lot of people may have think, if they don't or haven't been in the industry and listening, that it's just a plant you grow in your closet with some lights and then sell it in a bag is far beyond the truth. And it gets pretty complex. And we're going to get into some of these complexities today. Some of the topics we're excited to cover, and I'll let our audience read. We promise to try not to PowerPoint you guys to death. I know most people don't like to be read to, and just have an awesome conversation. Merril is a wealth of knowledge and information. I'm sure we'll go down hopefully some interesting rabbit holes for sure. But just getting into what's currently happening, what happened last year. There's obviously a lot of legal risks involved in getting into the CBD and hemp space, and a lot of them having to do more civil as well as state and federal. What's the supply chain management process look like, and the complexities and how to mitigate some of that risk? An area that's a specialty of Merril's, which is third-party certifications, knowing your ingredients, whether you're vertically integrated or sourcing from somebody else, and working with contract manufacturers, using technology, how to convey this transparency if you're a transparent company or want to become transparent to your buyers and market, and where we see this going. So no shortage of content. I'm sure that any one of these could probably take on a life of its own and be its own webinar, but we're going to cover a lot today. And if you guys are interested in hearing more, just shoot me a note at the end, and we will can have webinars on any one of these topics. So let's kick us off with a little poll to start. You should see a poll pop up. If not, there should be a button on your left, and which is, what do you feel has impacted the CBD and hemp industry most in 2019? And the questions are, the USDA interim final rule, civil lawsuits against CBD companies, the vaping crisis, expanded cannabis legalization, or FDA warnings against CBD. So just go ahead and fill that out, and we'll give some results in just a moment as they come in. And thank you guys, everybody, for participating. I put these polls in for a couple reasons. One, everybody loves a poll. I don't know why. We all like to participate and keep this out there, but also we get a chance to learn and see how other people are thinking and just make this a little bit more interactive. So, all right, let me give a quick results. And it looks like most people are feeling that the FDA warnings against CBD are the greatest, with number 2 being the interim final rule. Like, what do you think? What do you think, Merril? Like, what do you think was, some of the biggest impact for 2019? Merril, you there?
So when the Farm Bill came out, there was obviously this huge rush around not only cultivating and growing hemp, but all of these products. So, for a number of years in the world, we saw hemp seed oil, hemp this, because underlying people are very excited about cannabis, and they're excited about now CBD access, but it has been, not only a social stigma, but not very accessible. And we see this in Washington. So obviously when these Russia products came out, FDA knew that they needed to jump in. USDA needed to jump in because of the agriculture side. And so they're playing catch up. The good news is that, well, there's 2 factors to consider. One is, you just don't get to whatever crop you've been growing, you don't get to just jump in, pull that out, and think that you're going to grow hemp and 9 months later have it out onto the oils and extracts into the world. I mean, the plant itself absorbs a lot from the ground. So there's again, where you're getting problematic results in source materials comes from solvents that after it's been extracted, but the confusion between cultivated hemp for consumption and industrial hemp for rope and fiber, et cetera. So they're just trying to figure that out, but they were not prepared for all these products coming out onto the marketplace, and all of a sudden you're going to cure cancer and menopause and dementia, and you're going to look younger, feel better, you're going to put this on your skin. I mean, it's like all these unvalidated claims. So they went very much back to very traditional, that you cannot make any health claims, you cannot make any false claims around effectiveness or how it's going to be. And also because, again, this is such a new and emerging product line that people, what's going to happen. Ideally, if you're going to have a glass of wine, you don't necessarily know what's going to happen if you're going to put a drop of oil under your tongue and get that immediately absorbed into your system.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, anytime that something new comes on board, there's a lot of unknown. And when there's unknown, there tends to be fear, and there's going to be a spectrum of fear. And some people would, of course, argue, say, hey, cannabis with THC has been around for hundreds or thousands of years. As is hemp, we shouldn't be that fearful. And other people say, like, listen, we just don't know. Of course, there's individual responsibility and individual impact that could impact all of us. But as a result, there have been players in the market who are doing it right and want to do it right, and some who aren't doing it right. And it gets into just basic best practices where, to your point, I've learned so much over the last couple of years. I honestly didn't even know the difference between CBD and kind of THC cannabis 18 months ago. And now we're immersed in it, and we're meeting with cultivators and processors and, but basic rules still apply, which is labeling. And there's been a lot of civil lawsuits over this past year that get into labeling, seed quality claims that would just indicate a level of inexperience for companies that don't have somebody on their team that come from either the food or pharmaceutical or biotech background to help guide some of that, which we're going to get into a little bit later. But I'm kind of doing things a little bit backwards, going back. But what's been amazing to see is just the explosion in the current landscape for hemp and CBD products. Talk a little bit about that, what you're seeing, and kind of your growth as it's related, as well as some of the challenges that have occurred with this expansive growth.
Yeah. So as you can see, estimated global sales, and we don't have any final numbers, right? But all in for all these products, cannabis and CBD, it's about $14 billion. Last year, and this is definitely altered, but 2018's forecast, by 2025 was the entire industry being up in the hundreds of billions of dollars. We're probably, seeing that not come to fruition as quickly as we thought, just because, again, of this mass confusion and unregulated world that we're living in. And as we all move towards it and get better knowledge, we'll do better. But right now, so the good news is, and that's exciting, is the stigmatization around these products is starting to go away, and that Americans, just by, you can see this very recent Pew Trust analysis, is that a lot of Americans support legalization along everything, and they are looking at this as to alternatives, particularly with the opioid crisis and other problems with pain medications. How can I use this? And we're seeing, we just saw that the Olympians are going to be able to have CBD. We're starting to see that finally the military is looking at this for post-traumatic stress disorder. So we are, we're now at least normalizing this conversation, and really that's the hugest, most exciting part of this. And the fact that with Canada coming on as a full country, where America is also starting to see a lot more research being done. So, not just the information we're getting out of Canada, Israel, Brazil, et cetera, here in the United States. And the most important thing, too, on that last part of what happened in 2019 is that as part of the budget for this year, the government did allocate not a lot of money, but $2 million to FDA and USDA specifically so that they can, I'm going to make sure I get that right. But, to study hemp-derived CBD for research, to evaluate the marketplace, and for surveillance, right? So that they can go out and find the bad actors, because that's what happens in an unregulated market. That's where you get the bad things. And when we start to talk about supply chain, and a lot of the work that you and I have been talking about these last couple of weeks getting ready for this today, really is about that. How do I know what I'm getting, and how do I protect and limit risk?
Absolutely. So when I look at more the consumer side, there was a recent study by Nutrition Business Journal. It said it found an increase that in 2018, 47% of people were aware of CBD. That jumped to 70% in 2019. I can tell you, personally speaking, when I'm out at barbecues or hanging out with friends or with family, the topic comes out a lot. And so when we talk about areas that CBD can supposedly help, and there's still studies out on it, whether it's sleep, pain, anxiety, depression, whatever it may be, all of us struggle to some degree with those components, or want to get better there. There's certainly a demand. And then I think other indicators that, there's challenges which we had in our poll before. But as far as positive things, when I see companies like Church & Dwight, which is a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, and they're the maker of Vitafusion, announcing in the fall that they're launching a CBD gummy. Now you're getting large enterprise, certainly a lot more sophisticated than an early stage CBD company. They also have the attorneys, they have the influencers, the lobbyists that say they're betting this is going to happen. And of course, they have the relationships with big box stores in order to make that happen. But as we kind of hit on before, as with any growth, there's challenges. And I think that, I don't know what your thoughts are, but certainly one of the biggest challenges of 2020, and we're going to get into a little bit more with this interim final rule, is measuring THC and how that reporting is going to impact individual states. So I know we'll come back on that, but something that I hadn't really put a lot of thought on until you and I spoke earlier is the vaping crisis, if you may, that happened in 2019. Talk a little bit about how that, as you dubbed it, Vapegate, is a good learning lesson for the CBD industry, and what we can take away from that as business leaders.
So, interesting. I love that you bring up that this is now a topic at the barbecue with our parents, with a variety of different groups of people that you never had this conversation with before, right? It was always a joke. It was always kind of hidden. It was definitely not a mainstream conversation. But people, are seeing it everywhere, and they are wondering, hey, what's the difference between buying it in a licensed dispensary versus the gas station? And this is where this source material. So the Vapegate really shined a light on this, right? Because one of the things, and research is still being done, we don't have all of the information that caused these horrific lung injuries, but all of that product came from unregulated, unlicensed producers, where they took an adulterated source material already, added solvents and pesticides. So again, whether it is CBD and in particular American USA grown hemp, the good actors, the Charlotte Webbs of the world, the Rebotanicals, et cetera, these people are growing in small batches. They have complete control over the plant and the source materials. And one of the things in any license, whether it's cannabis or hemp-derived products, is the plant itself. That is what's under the most regulatory body. So they have to test for levels of THC and CBD, and then they have to test the source material for pesticides, solvents, molds, etc. So, that's why when you see this acetate, this vitamin E acetate and stuff, you would never get that in a licensed product, period. Right. It would not be happening. So it really reinforced the need for stronger testing and certification. It highlighted, again, where you buy your product and how you buy it and who do you trust, which, again, is mass confusion. But it's also this implementation of the stronger supply chain. And it's a lot of what, we're excited about the conversation we're having here today on this webinar, right? Is how do I start, if I am, a business in this world, to create a way that is very much traceable and trustworthy. And trustworthy is the huge thing, no matter what products. I mean, the same consumer that is buying organic milk and cares about fair trade, et cetera, is the same consumer that is looking at this label, and they're willing to spend more for that quality.
Which is a perfect segue into this slide, which is, as consumers, we're learning more. We're learning maybe to be a little bit more skeptical, or maybe trust and verify, depending on where you sit on the spectrum. Thank you, Netflix, for maybe cautiously scaring anybody who wants to get educated on what we're putting in and on our bodies. For sure, I know it's changed our eating habits on our side, but certainly, I'd love to get some of your perspective on some things that we learned, adding a little bit more that we learned in 2019 that we're starting to apply, as it relates to engaging consumers with claims, or, how to, regulation, what's happening with the FDA, and kind of, here it talks about, a lot of the whole industry is waiting for the FDA to make a claim. Our CEO, TJ Gupta, who specializes in track and traceability, specifically in the pharmaceutical side, said that the FDA sat on the sideline for the equivalent of 5 to 10 years for track and traceability in pharmaceuticals, and it wasn't until California actually laid down policy that they had to follow, because the state of California on its own is like the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. And if they're doing it, the rest of the country needs to do it too. So what are your thoughts on some of the regulations that we're waiting for, and as well as the infrastructure, the supply chain track and traceability that down the pipeline?
Yeah. So again, this is where FDA and USDA has been so strong about not having not even declassifying cannabis as a Scheduled I narcotic, right? So we can't even move that way, and let alone until they change this farm bill, because again, all of the agricultural states saw, well, great, here's a way to
we love dogs, by the way, Merril.
Really,
nobody's offended here.
Bring money.
Yep. And oddly, it happens all the time. I've got kids and dogs and cats, and anytime I'm live and something happens, you can certainly count if your dog's been sleeping all day long, they're going to join us. So welcome to the webinar, Puppy. The point.
Milo has an opinion about everything.
Exactly. Absolutely. So, I mean, right now, fortunately, there's a bill on the table that just came out from a congressman from Minnesota to move the CBD to the supplement side, which is, what CRN, Council for Responsible Nutrition, has been pushing for. I think anybody in the industry has been pushing for. Let's create a path for this as a supplement, and then hold it to those standards. Is that where you are in line with CBD? Or I know you specialize in the food side too, which makes it also complex.
So here's the thing, they need to come along, but those of us, again, from these previous product manufacturing worlds, need to guide that conversation, because they're now in reactionary, but they still don't have, because it was not allowed, don't have all the information. So those of us that have been living and working it and really moving this forward are trying to guide these conversations. We have good groups like the USA Hemp Authority, USA Roundtable, again, trying to guide this. We have, because we have these people that have been committed to this for a number of years, and not just coming out in 2018 when the Farm Bill changed. They understand the importance of, again, the separation of cultivated versus industrial. And it's, because this plant absorbs so much information, so much from the soil, it's really important that soil be cleaned ahead of time, right? So again, coming back to something that you're going to consume, you have to be ensured that the plant is being grown in the most optimal way. And so it takes, if you're doing it outside and in soil, it takes 3 years to get any former residuals that you've had if you were growing soybean, if you weren't growing things organically. And again, we're just starting to be able to get, like with the USA Hemp Roundtable and such, some organic certifications around this, but we've got a ways to go, and we just have to be. So we're about 5 years out, but most importantly, if we can get some of these things through this year and into 2021, and we can get safe banking done, we'll be moving in the right direction.
No, I agree. And I think I actually had a note for later. I'll just piggyback on there, which is playing the long game. And, I was talking to another expert, it might have been you, that said, hey, companies that think they want to make money this year or next year are approaching it the wrong way. And I'm going to launch this poll while we're having this conversation, just to let you guys participate. But thinking 5 years out, there's such tremendous opportunity, and not even just in the supplement or food sector, but also in the fiber sector for hemp. But we need to master this crop, right? And mastering the crop and understanding that it's a cleaning crop and everything that goes into that certainly creates some challenges. But if we think long and our investors think long, and then we're bringing on the right people to master this, then the opportunity is going to be huge for everybody. And it's going to be the projections are all over the place, $25 billion industry by 2025. And who knows how we calculate that. But I think we're seeing a pretty large explosion across the board. So real quick, I'll give some results for this poll. Like, what do you think is most important to mitigate risk? And right now it's building a transparent supply chain, good manufacturing practices, and conducting thorough testing are the top results from that. So let me move back into that. So mitigating risk in 2020. Growing any company is hard and comes with challenges, and usually have, I've come from a startup environment. It usually starts with a couple of people with ideas who can learn pretty well on the fly and know how to put a business together, but aren't always subject matter experts. How do you see companies that are starting to gain traction or have gained traction? How can they best mitigate their risk as they look back in 2019 and are looking at 2020 as it relates to, especially some of their supply chain transparency and product quality?
So I think the other ancillary industry that is also really looking at this topic in new ways and is on the insurance side, right? Because they, obviously they've had to be involved, particularly in California, et cetera, over this last 5 years. But more importantly, again, with the huge immersion around CBD and CBD products, the exposure level, the risk management side, how do we figure this out? Where do we need to be in it? And obviously, there's so much cost involved. And so it's not just from recalls to transparency. So where we see things moving is in, there was so much product that came out in the early part of 2019, as I said, and through it. And then all of a sudden in that last quarter, you started to see a lot of things happen. And so you're going to see a lot more mergers and acquisitions, but you're also going to see a lot of the people that just were trying to jump in very quickly be out. And the ones that are going to, and you can be a startup, where you get your best advantage though is finding advisors. You don't have to know everything, but you really should do your research and do your homework and find the people that have the skill sets and knowledge that you do. And what's so beautiful about just the overall innovation world that we are in today is that there is so much going on across the country in what we call the incubator states, the maker space. So there are webinars like we're having today. There are ways, and so just kind of follow the threads and find the right people that can help educate you and teach you, and be supportive of that. If you have knowledge and you can mentor that back, I really encourage that, because it is really, as I said, it's all ships rising. It's not just one of us. We have to work together, and not just on the competitiveness at the end result on the shelf, but really about making sure that we continue to grow as an industry.
No, you're so right. And that, when you take a look at building your team, and you can build a team a couple different ways, but one, it starts with values and culture, which typically means that humility needs to start at the top to say, okay, I'm outside of my lane. Who can I bring in who can complement me? And there is, so whether you're looking for a full-time employee or a consultant, like yourself, or an advisory board member who can tell you when and where, and I'm going to get to that in a second, like when is the right time to bring on somebody. But I know there was one company we met with in Colorado called Treehouse Biotech, and they do formulations and processing. But their COO, she came from a biotech background. When she met with the co-founder, she flat out told him, "I don't think you're ready for me, because I'm not really sure I'm going to make changes around here, and you may not like him." And he pretty much hired her on the spot, because he wanted that level of sophistication and to do what was hard. And they were just got their GMP certification. But recognizing that getting a GMP certification is difficult. It means you have to do things like put on eyewear in an area where it doesn't necessarily seem like it makes sense. But from your perspective, Merril, when do you think is the right time that a CBD company who's getting the processing and manufacturing should bring on a GMP specialist or a quality assurance specialist? Is that from day one, or once they've got some validation? When's the right time?
All of the above. So, again, if you are producing something that is going to be consumed, right, whether you're growing it, processing it, making it into something else, you really need to, you can't just download SOP guidelines and GMPs off of the internet and say, look, I have paperwork. You need to make sure from the beginning that you understand, what are you trying to make? Where am I getting it? How do I, if I am not that experienced at understanding a certificate of analysis, what is it? What's all the terminology? Like, do your homework, but more importantly, and I'm not trying to bring this down to the lowest level, but it's more importantly to going back to those values, like, I need to be able to replicate my processes from every single day. So how do I receive materials? How do I store materials? How do I process materials? How do I finish them, label them, put them in the box, and get them ready to ship? And all of that traceability has to happen. And if you don't start from the beginning, being very organized and diligent and committed to that process, it's a lot of catch up all the time. And so, you can't just go off of something that you can think is just paperwork. You've got to really be committed to training programs, and not just with your initial team, but every employee that comes after. You always want to start with the highest level of training and continue to always build upon that, and not just you got to look at labor costs and training and onboarding as just as important as turning on the electricity and paying your cable bill, right? It's got to be ingrained into your everyday operating expenses.
I think that's really important, because it's easy, for companies to say, well, it's an ops cost. Sales, people get into sales, there's always budget for that. And of course, for developing the product. And obviously, there's no business if you don't have a product and you can't sell it. But the in-between, when people are putting these on their body or in their body, is really, really important. And we wanted to share this slide, too, just to look at, some of the complexities and that journey from hemp to consumer product that often take place. Looking at that, how something's grown, starting from a seed, and how it ends up on a package with theoretically a QR code that tells the consumer all about it. Do you feel like that the traceability of CBD, when you walk into a store, and now I'm seeing it all over the place. I was at my local grocery store yesterday. There's a little kiosk there with 5 or 6 different brands. I was happy that I recognized a handful of them that are reputable. But knowing, like, who's ever the regional manager of this grocery store, are they asking the right questions? Do you feel like there's enough attention has been made to traceability of CBD back to hemp? And what kind of questions should brands, or I guess what kind of answers should brands be giving to consumers? What should consumers be asking for in this whole supply chain?
Well, so I love this graphic that you have up. And because all along here is the story, right? And the story provides information, and information provides education. Education provides experience. And when you are now standing in the store and you ask your retailer, what do you recommend? They can actually give you an answer, but we're still not there. So when we get into the finished oils, et cetera, and then we go to the POS and the consumer, that is where this whole process becomes wonderful. And that transparency of the finished good, right? So the retailers are struggling, and that's why as much as you saw all these products on the shelf, a lot of them have been taken down too. The distributors are pulling a lot of it because they're very much reluctant because of the FDA's situation. So this becomes paramount to how do you differentiate yourself, and how do I really communicate about that? And so when you get to this process of really committing to every single step along the way, you are building not only a team within your organization that really can replicate and process and trace everything. You get to take that into your sales and your marketing, and you get it into philosophy, and you get to tell your story on your label. But more importantly, it's the buyer at the retailer that's going to get this information, or if you're in a dispensary, the bud tenders, all along the way. And ultimately, those also become your talking points in your stories as you go to reach the consumer and drive your brand awareness and your brand loyalty to your commitment, again, to those values that we said in the first place. Really start this process and our living document for your evolution.
Yep, I think that's awesome. And so, I mean, getting into ingredients, I mean, at the end of the day, it's what it is, right? There's multiple steps, and that what we're buying is all about, where we're sourcing it from. And when something's put in a bottle, how do you tell the difference? And often an analogy that I use for people in the industry is like, hey, if I've got 3 M&Ms, one's chocolate, one doesn't taste like anything, is one's poison, and you don't know which is which one are you going to take? And the answer is none of them, right? So then you've got, complete paralysis by not having full knowledge and transparency. Here you brought up some good points when it gets into. So talk to me a little bit about ingredients and the importance of those other ingredients that we're mixing and blending with CBD, the importance of extraction methodologies, and just how critical testing is. And maybe what some of the CBD manufacturers and brands should be testing and sharing that they're testing as well.
So one of the things that we're really, finally starting to move the conversation forward is this is an ingredient. Now, it could be a standalone ingredient when it's dry and in its flower form, and but when you start to make it into something else, it's now an ingredient with other components around it, unless it's going to be a standalone. So when we talk about extraction methodologies, what is getting used that gets consumed is the flower. The seeds, yes, you see them again in food products and oils, etc., hemp seed oil, but there's limited nutritional value in that as something that's a functional ingredient. As the oil, what we talk about is when we take that plant material and then we start to extract that down, how it gets something into whatever that next component is. So, the purest way is taking it down to the crude oil, and then as you continue to process it and refine it, you get all the way down to these other terminologies around distillates, isolates, etc. So I always like to use the example of a tomato, a fresh tomato right off the vine is full spectrum.
Right.
But when you look at it as a supplement, that's an isolate, right? So you've reduced that initial fresh fruit, plant, vegetable down to a crystal at the end. Now it's that isolated thing, and you can use it in a variety of different ways. So you have to think of it in that way. And then what is the best infusion method for what you're trying to create? And so other ingredients, though, and this is where it gets very confusing when you get false or bad product that has to be pulled off the market or doesn't receive a final certificate of analysis for consumption. And that is because oftentimes we have these new labs coming on board that don't come from, again, these variety of nutraceutical, pharmaceutical, blah, 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 that don't look at the full spectrum of ingredients in a product. And so, yes, you now have this really clean oil that you started with, or isolate, distillate, etc., but you didn't take into consideration that peppermint extract might have come from another country, and that's where your trace metals are. Or a lot of times, we see things that have honey in it, right? So the honey, the bees are out, gathering their pollen from all these different things. So, the field next to it that they're getting it from uses pesticides. It uses, so these things are very costly to the producer. They're very costly because when you have to throw things away, destroy them, when you have to relabel everything, when I say the only people that have made money in 2019 is the label companies, it is the truth, right? Because all that packaging that got thrown away. So we also, something very important in your early stages of launching any product is not overcommit to your packaging, not over, get your style and your form, but make sure it's something that you haven't, spent thousands and thousands of dollars that you're, sitting on a ton of inventory for, that all of a sudden it becomes null and void for whatever reason in a regulatory environment. The certificate analysis, you need it on every single ingredient, not just, as I said, that source material for your CBD. You really need to understand all things are going, and you want those very reputable vendor relationships, so that, if somebody says, well, I don't have one, then move on, buy from somebody else, right? and just make sure that you keep this continual trail of documentation, which I know that you and I are going to talk a little bit more about in a minute. But, again, traceability is not just a word. It is an actual process.
And what are your thoughts if somebody say white labeling, like there's a contract manufacturer and I'm just going to white label, put my brand on it. What's the responsibility of the brand to do their own testing as well? And what should the bare minimum tests be that they're running on a product?
So, again, we have two things. Do I produce in my own facility, or do I find somebody else to produce for me? And both of those things, there's an amount of control that you want to maintain. But the way you go about creating a co-packing relationship is like any other relationship. So one of the things on the lab side, if you're self-making or even just buying, you want to establish your own relationship with a lab, and you don't want to hop around. You don't want to go price jumping. Oh, these guys are $5 cheaper, whatever. That's not the way in which you pick a relationship. And it's the same for co-packing, right? You need to build a relationship over time. In a lab scenario, it's because you're building a product profile, because they're starting, they're seeing all your materials, they're seeing all your ingredients, and they can alert you and be a part of a very proactive mitigation of problems as you're going, right? Where you can have corrective actions before you've labeled and finished packaging. But on the co-packing relationship, you want to find the best facility that already knows how to produce something that you're making, right? You don't want to have to pay for their education. And you also want them to be well established and to have as much certification and ingredient sourcing and have those things. One, because they really help you with your cost of goods in that, but you want their expertise. You want them to be able to learn and grow with you, and you want to be able to capture that. So they should have those GMP certifications, and they should have a process. And that when you go to them, I mean, some of the work that we do is really helping. You've been making that small batch, and now you're going to commercial production. We help, with that formulation in between, so that when you do that handoff to the co-packer, it is 90% done, other than the first run batches of them doing it, and making it there. But we're giving them a formula that they can already, implement right away, whether we stand there or not. And these are very key components, right? So you're looking at their capabilities, not only of being able to produce it, but their own integrity and their own transparency, and be able to make that product for you time and time again, and deliver it, always in the best conditions, with traceability, with a HACCP program, with a recall system in place, so that every single batch is traceable from the beginning to end.
And what may be some flags that it's either you currently are, or the one you may be talking to is not the right contract manufacturer? And I don't know if you have any stories, nightmare stories that may have occurred with people that just went with the wrong company.
Well, we saw a lot of people lose a lot of product in this last year, and again, it's not doing your due diligence, and it's not understanding what it really costs to make something. And so every time you have to destroy something, every time you have to relabel something, every time you don't understand yourself how to make that, then, this is where we say, find those mentors, find those advisors, find people that have already succeeded in what you're trying to do. One of the things that I have to say that's been really encouraging about this industry is that people really do want to share knowledge and learn from each other, right? They all are trying to move in the same direction. So don't be afraid to ask. If somebody says no to you, go to somebody else, but really start to build your network and really don't be afraid to ask hard questions. Make sure that you get good MNDAs in place because you want to make sure that your IP is protected, but you also understand that when you're in that co-packing facility that there's other things being made, right? So you know, they can't necessarily take yours product and do that. But again, if you establish the good relationships from the beginning, you're going to really have something that will give you longevity over time.
Excellent. And so third-party certifications, like how can we get some other entity to validate what we're doing is the right thing to do? And this is an area that is certainly, an area of expertise for you. How important do you think it is to the CBD and cannabis space to start to have certifications available? And when's the right time for companies to start investing in these? And what are the benefits?
Mm-hmm. So there was a study done kind of early summer and an article that came out in New Hope, which is part of the whole natural products world. And they were trying to see if do certifications on products still resonate and mean anything, and are there too many on there? And it turns out that no, if ever, it's even more important to people, right? They do want to know that something has been validated independently, and it's not just you saying, hey, I make the best X, right? Because I said so. And so, again, because this has not been held under high standardization and high regulatory, we have very limited marks that go to this. So USA Hemp Authority, as I said, as part of the Hemp Roundtable, did introduce a certification mid 2019 that is specific to hemp grown in the United States. So it is also looking at finished goods, but it's the first independent third-party certification in addition to the two that we've introduced, a true dose for cannabis and HGMP for hemp. Mm-hmm. The variance there is, again, they're looking at source materials and stuff. We really focus on the entire life cycle. When we look at things, we're looking, as I said early on, what is it telling you on the label? How easy is it for you to understand that for instructions for use, and opening it up and then validating that independently in the lab? But more importantly, you do not buy anything in your everyday life that doesn't have something. A retailer does not take in any products that haven't had something, whether it's SQF certified UL on your TV, just to give you an example. That's why. So in our world, it's very important, and the consumers are looking, again, the retailer and the consumers are looking for ways to identify good actors, but identify products that they can rely on, and in ways that they know the majority of all safety precautions have been mitigated from the beginning. And that's why, so we're really starting to see this. So going beyond the plant, looking at all ingredients, looking at methodologies for standard operating procedures and good manufacturing practices, and being able to make that product same and same and same again, right? Oh, I bought that thing one time and then I took it the next time and it was completely different, right? That's not going to build a brand. That's not going to build your reputation as a company. So, that's why these processes become so crucial, especially if you go state to state.
So let's say you own a CBD company, what would be the first certifications that you would start to look at?
So again, it's, again, there's not a lot in the product, but I would look for the basic GMP certifications. As I said, I think earlier, we're doing work with SES Global Services. And so they're just introducing and launching their HACCP and hemp training programs. And so these are the kinds of things you start to look for in the facility first, right? And then, we're starting to see a little bit about clean green. You are starting to see, things that are saying gluten-free and vegan, et cetera. But it's really important that if you make that claim, you better be able to have the certification to put that on there. Oftentimes, people say, oh, no, I just did it because it's vegan. Well, again, it comes back to you don't get to say that claim unless you actually have had an independent third-party recognized authoritative body recognize that, right? You just can't put stuff on there and say, hey, I'm kosher. Like, no, if you didn't have an actual certifying rabbi come in, you're not kosher.
I would have to think that organic would be an important one. And kind of while we're talking about this, I'm going to run the next poll, which is, what's the most important component of supply chain transparency in your organization? So if you guys just want to answer this real quick, we'll get back to it. But, especially with hemp being a cleaning crop and knowing that it's organic certified, I would have to imagine something that's important to consumers, especially for, tinctures and pills as well. Again, this all goes back to if it's organic, then you're talking about getting in that supply chain and knowing the source of the product. And how do we track? And the next slide we're going to look at is how do we track key data and information from even before the plant down to the seed or down to the clone all the way through to that final product. So we get some results in. And ingredient traceability is number one, having tight process and software solutions, number two, GMPs, and hiring the right person. So all good stuff for sure. So
I love that. That's a good key into what we're going to talk about. And that is, technology has moved us forward, right? We finally can link a lot of this information together.
Right.
And that's the future's here, right? Right. And the fact that it works on multiple devices. So
absolutely. I spoke to a gentleman yesterday and they are really focused. They're not a hemp CBD company, but they're a organic herbs, spices, turmeric, importing more than 100 different products, predominantly from India. And they're really focused on quality and transparency. But he's like, Joe, we're still using a spreadsheet, right? We've got multiple spreadsheets, Microsoft Access, the codes break. I'm using Dropbox. It's really, really hard, when we're working with more than 20,000 farmers, and you talk about complex, to know where everything comes from and to track, all this information with a batch number is very difficult to do. When you go into a company and you kind of do an internal audit and you start to develop GMPs, how are companies trying to manage all their data and information? What's their current systems they have in place these days?
Well, there are still the ones just that you described. That unfortunately it's still true. They're running around. They might use a tablet for inventory, but they're still not there. Where there's some still disconnect is taking a system that has been used in other industries and not doing the due diligence to bring it into this, right? And so when we look though at companies like yours, we don't have that. And so what's most important to any, I don't care what business you're in, is that can my different platforms speak to each other? And so, this future of, not future, today, of blockchain capabilities, ERP, which is your entire planning, like all of these things talking together so that, again, from seed to sale, we have full, and track and trace in California, which was implemented last year and has been a nightmare for a lot of people. Again, this is where the label companies all got to, has to work with some of these other systems as well, so that, again, we're not only duplicating information, but we're making sure that the information that we're collecting is consistent all the way through. Because when you do, unfortunately, might have a recall scenario, you've got to be able to go all the way back. And you've got to understand all the different tentacles of where this product might have been touched and gone to other hands. So where did it start? Again, was it the sugar and not the oil extract? We have to find those connectivities, and that's where the software becomes crucial all the way through in the supply chain and all the way through to how it ends up on the shelf.
Absolutely. And it's really a trust.
And that not only on the shelf, but again that risk. Right. Can I get it back if I need to?
Yep. A trust but verify mentality. And so, I mean, blockchain, for our listeners who don't know much about blockchain, just to give you an idea, oftentimes it's associated with Bitcoin. It's not a fintech. It's basically helping to take your data and to create an immutable digital ledger, right? So the analogy I like to create is, think of a Word document with a red line tracking, and anytime somebody makes a change to that, it's going to notate that track or change to any data that's pushed to the blockchain. Our platform is blockchain enabled. Not all of our customers are ready for it or use it. It is also a private blockchain, which means it's only for your information. It's not public. Some people have a misconception that, it's on the blockchain, the whole world can access it. It's not true. Not for our platform. You could if you wanted to, but basically it is a validation for your information and data. Should you want to use it, and should you want to use it for an audit or for a partner, they can feel really confident that the data in there is what it is. So from your perspective, Merril, when it comes to hemp to CBD or really natural product supply chain, what kind of impact do you think blockchain may have in building confidence to buyers and consumers into a product's provenance?
Well, I think we said this, but more importantly, it's the full transparency and traceability of that product. And anytime you can do that, anytime you can find your source materials all the way through and look at it, from everywhere it's gone and where every place it will go, builds and establishes not only trust, but the future, right? The longevity of this. And it's I can't stress enough how important it is to be able to identify what you're doing and where you're making it and how you're making it, and being able to communicate that outward and not be afraid of it, right? Use it to your advantage. Use it to create your better efficiencies. Use it to find new farmers, new relationships, all along the line. It's building credibility. It's building brand equity. It's just, you just need it. I mean, and there's no reason not to think about it today, even if you can't use it today. But how do you incorporate it in the future? Because it's the only thing that's going to make this work for everyone, right? Is being able to mitigate risk and being able to validate what you're creating is what it is and what it says it is, and will do what you want it to do.
Absolutely. So Merril, I know we're running up against it. Do you have some more time just to continue the conversation? I know we may be running a little bit more. Okay, awesome. So listen, listeners out there, if you guys have to jump because it's 2:00, what I'll do is I'll follow up with you and share the presentation. But we're going to keep talking here. We're on a roll here, and we don't want to end something that's going well. So we're going to keep rocking and rolling. Just to talk a little bit about capturing information at every step. Our co-founders, TJ and Manish, that they, having come from retail and pharmaceutical supply chain track and traceability, they recognize those gaps that occurred and how siloed people are at the farm versus the processor versus the retailer, and wanted to tie those together, which is why we developed our three main components: TagOne Harvest, which we've modified for hemp growers to capture, cultivar type, seed, clone, the farm location, harvest date, yield, THC levels, all that at the start. Pull that into the post-harvest processing information. One area that really gets convoluted and probably ignored is just knowing all your different suppliers, knowing all your different buyers. Anytime there's a blend, you take 5 or 6 different products that may come from different suppliers and blend them all together, and then there's a new lot number on the other side. That's oftentimes where inventory gets lost and lot numbers get lost. On to the final end, which is people get most excited about, but it's really just the end result of doing the first two steps the right way. TagOne Connect, which is the QR code labeling solution, which is now, oddly enough, required by law in at least 4 states. I know it's been on the table in New York and Florida as well, where how can you engage the consumer with the source, science, safety, and sometimes the stories behind your product, sharing that C of A, sharing the traceability about, hey, our hemp was grown in Colorado or Arizona or California, and here's a short video about our farmer and information. You specialize, Merril, in consulting for companies in food and cannabis. When you see something like TagOne Connect and having the ability to engage consumers, is that potentially a game changer for companies? And now it's law, oddly enough. So, what we're recommending is, hey, if it's in 4 or 5 states, you might as well do it anyways, especially if you're selling something online. How can this help you if you're going in and doing GMPs for a company and have a system to create guidelines? What I like to kind of say is those bumper rails on a bowling alley. How can that help you help the company if they have the right systems in place?
Great question. It's so crucial to be able to, again, a lot of money is spent on technology, but it's not always as well thought out of how it needs to work. And so when you get a system like this, where you can really pull up not only all your data, but your certifications, it makes the process that we do for GMP certifications so much easier, right? Because it cuts down the physical time that we need to be there. It helps identify areas where you might be vulnerable faster, but it also gets to reward you quicker and move that, it's going from a couple of weeks to get certified to, a couple of months, right? Because you have so much work that has to be done. So anytime you have a system that really keeps all of the information together and really, again, not just what you created last week, but what you created this week, and then what you're going to create in the future, it's huge, right? This is all money to your bottom line. Every time you create something efficiently, understanding the true cost of what it is from raw materials, overhead, margin, marketing, all of the things that go into that, your risk management, getting you closer to profitability and to a price on your back door before it gets into the retail and gets into their hands, everybody wins, because it really continues to make a viable marketplace, and it allows these consumers to have the best products available.
Absolutely.
And ideally, predictable experiences, which is what we're all here for.
Absolutely. And so, the final kind of product, if you say, like the end result of using our platform, and it is what we call our visual map, right? Where you can go select a product, select the lot number, and here you can see the full traceability of all the different ingredients that go in there. Who are their suppliers? What are the lot numbers? What's the location? And then click on any one of those and be able to see the associated documentation with that, which is such, as you mentioned, is so big. If you've got to conduct an audit, and as well as we're actually getting heavy into being able to provide data and analytics for companies to be able to look back, and then not just what happened this past month, but what's happened over the past 3 years, and who are our biggest suppliers, and where are we finding the most issues, just to give forward-thinking leaders that data they need to make decisions. So kind of getting to this traceability, it's not a fast process, right, Merril? So when you go into
using the words fast and easy are never a good sign of something, right? In our world, right? Because it's never really fast and it's never really easy. It takes work and it takes commitment and it takes doing it every day. It's not like, oh, we'll just do it today and we'll, look at it again in next quarter. Like, you have to live these things. You have to, again, that's where this training becomes so crucial, that the commitment, is along everyone. Like, it's not, I'm the leader, everything, is great because of me. It's like, no, it takes your team, your entire team working together and committed to this process and taking the time to train people and get their feedback, right? Because when you're, just because I make a recommendation, I'm only having a snapshot. If you're doing this work day in and day out, you're going to have a way better perspective and way more solutions to solve everyday problems and really take advantage of your systems and really bringing them to do better.
The word that comes to mind is discipline. Certainly initiative just to get the ball started, but then discipline to do it right afterwards. So when you work with a company, who are usually the people who are involved, the titles who are involved in order to integrate GMPs and traceability?
So initial conversations, we always start any project with what we call an alignment meeting, and those are any stakeholders in the company. So it can be the CEO, COO, CMO, all of the floor manager, et cetera, in the group that are coming together to really align what are we trying to accomplish, right? Where do we see things? What is non-negotiable? What do we hold dearly onto? And then that really defines the work that follows. And so, oftentimes any GMP process is, as we just talked about, it's a data and document review. It is a formulation review, and all of this under the highest integrity of protecting IP, as I've said before, and confidentiality. An on-site visit for something like that, or a very secure document review that's for a very limited access time, either on our protected server or theirs. And then it's the actual, going into the facility and doing the audit and working through it and really going through and being, it does take a time commitment to do this, but we have never been, in even our prior years of experience before this, we've never met with a team that didn't find the experience rewarding, and particularly, the ongoing relationship of when you see corrective actions that need to happen. We love to encourage people with guidance to how to do it themselves, but we're always here to be, help them on site as well to get to that higher thing, right? So, we want that to be fluid, and we want it to be a continual education process, but we want them to be able to do their own problem solving and take these resources with them. And then we always, as I said, we like to reward the people that are doing a great job, right? Because that's fantastic. And those, that's where I said, if you already have these systems in place and you already know you've come full circle in this, then getting your certification should be a relatively fast and smooth process, as opposed to, as I said, where it can take months because you're really having to put a lot of process in place that wasn't there initially.
Awesome. And there's good news, right? So companies do this, because it's the right thing to do. And they should sleep better because they're minimizing risk. But there's also other benefits to commitment to product transparency and quality. Talk a little bit about like what you've seen and maybe how some companies have benefited from implementing GMPs once they're, I don't know if the process is ever done, but once they've initiated this process.
Well, one of the things I thought we might have had it on our list, but I'm not seeing on our list. And number one is, circling back to insurance, right? But mitigating risk is a big thing. So again, if you can prove your supply chain all the way through and your good manufacturing processes and your ability to produce this product day in and day out correctly and the same, and have a really strong recall system in place, then your insurance companies will also benefit, and you benefit with that cost savings on product liability, right? Because you're showing and demonstrating that you have a high level of integrity for safety. So that's like one area that happens. And again, as I said before, really driving the cost of production down because you're really being efficient and you've established some ways in which you really understand that. So all of those end up benefiting the retailer and more importantly, the consumer, particularly as we start to see more and more products come online. There's going to be this cost awareness for the consumer, and what will differentiate you is that you can validate that you can tell the story, and that there's a way for them to identify that you're a good actor. So we've talked about that. So and the consumer, you are targeting, that is looking to these products, is reading labels. They already really care about what they're using and putting in their bodies or on their bodies, and so they want to trust you, and they want to build a brand loyalty, and they will tell their friends. So, and they will spend more. They will spend more. That we know that the things that have a certified organic, organic milk is definitely costs a little more than traditional milk. So safe and reliable experiences. You want people to not try you once. You want them to come back again and buy you again, and you want them to be able to experience it in the same way. So again, these things really tie back to that. And then the science and data, we are so excited. The cannabinoid system is just starting to be done, and we've only talked about CBD, but we started a little bit on plant genetics and the terpene, which is the entourage effects. Again, I add lavender, that's the scent, or I get a citrus. All of these things. We didn't get into some of the other terminology, but on efficacy, CBN for that we're seeing, can help with sleep. CBG for inflammation. We are just at the beginnings of these things. So as more research and science come on, who knows where we're going to go, but it's all super exciting and encouraging. Yep. And then the stronger supply chain, right? So once we can unify on regulatory and growing and transparency, then, like everything else, you're going to find the best materials to build your products from, and that is good for everyone, right? Because that just makes everyone stronger. And then again, product transparency, people really do care, and particularly, we're seeing this with Generation Z, who are coming quick and fast. One, they really engage in their technology, and they're committed to that. But secondly, they really care where things come from, and they Absolutely. Really care how things are made. And so, the more you can be transparent, the more you can demonstrate that you are making things really beautifully and well, time and time and time again, and that you can be profitable and sustainable. And when I talk about sustainability, and not just about the environment, but as a good, strong business, you win. You win in the popular vote, and you win in sales, and you win in building a brand over time, which is going to be the exciting part when we see where we are a year, 2 years, 3 years from where we are today.
Absolutely. It's about building that strong foundation. We had a webinar, I think about 4 months ago, with Yadim Medor, the CEO at Pure Branding, and he does extensive studies on the impact of product and brand transparency, and found that 70% of consumers are more inclined to purchase from brands that illustrate transparency than those that don't. So it actually is good business practices as well. So I'm going to skip the poll just for time's sake and get in. So, all right, 2020's here. Like, there's been no shortage of news right off the gate. It's been pretty crazy. What are your big, what are you seeing that's happening? How do you think it's going to impact this CBD and hemp business in this coming year?
So as I mentioned at the end of the year, there was a lot of pullback, and I just spent the beginning of the week at the specialty food show here in San Francisco. It's a big products, similar to the Natural Products Expos, but and so many people were like, we were making a product, it got pulled from shelves, a lot of retailers pulled back. We're going to see a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and we're going to see a lot in this first quarter, a pullback in the market. But I think as we get more into the year, as some of this money actually starts flowing through FDA and USDA, and we get some more clarity on label and regulation, we're going to start to really see the innovation. I think I've said this, maybe not early on in today's call, but the more that this gets destigmatized and the more access to products, we're really going to see there's some really game changers. Beverage is a super great entry for people to try CBD. We're going to see a lot more of that come on with the advancements of the water soluble technology that's making these things great. You're going to see a lot in probably the functional space, with some supplements, particularly if they pass this bill that's out there. And you're going to also see, this as an ingredient, right? And how do I, maybe do it at home? We have a woman here in the Bay Area, Jamie Evans, who has a cookbook coming out in the spring just on CBD and malt cocktails. We're seeing the people moving away from alcohol and low alcoholic beverages. And so as an ingredient, we're going to really start to see things. It was in California left out as something that, you could have in beverages, and you're seeing that. So you'll look for an evolution on that and where you can consume things. I think there was a rage all over the country. It's like, oh, have your latte with CBD in it. That got pulled back very quickly because it hasn't been regulated. But we're going to see evolution in that, and that come back full, around with much more reliable source materials going into those so that you can then offer those drinks back.
Yep. Yeah, I think some latest news that I've been reading over the last couple of days, and I think is certainly relevant. There's potentially a cannabis case going to Supreme Court being led by a former NFL player to decriminalize marijuana, and that, of course, will have significant implications. Because I think as cannabis or THC, cannabis goes, it certainly has an impact on acceptance and tolerance of CBD. Recently, there are several, I think 6 or 7 states that are punting on their agricultural rules for hemp, almost and kind of asking for extensions for the USDA rule, basically saying, hey, we're going to keep our rules in place for 2020, I think they're hoping the USDA gets some clarification because the interim final hemp rule as it relates to 0.3% THC and has to be reported and what's reported and when it's reported and reported to whom, I think is frustrating. So I think it's good to see states pushing back on that. We did hold a seminar on that topic previously as well. If you want to get the deck on that, we can. But and of course the new bill that just came out to approve and kind of push CBD as a supplement and be treated as a supplement, I think is big also. So I think there's a lot of big things coming in 2020 that should give some clarity. My gut feeling is I feel like the horse is already out of the barn. I think Congress and law enforcement is going to have an extremely difficult time trying to close that barn door now the horse is out, but who knows what to expect and what can happen down the road. So do you have time for a couple questions, Merril, and then we'll let everybody get back to work?
I do, and you tell me how is your time?
I'm good. This is what I'm here for, so I'm absolutely good. So all right, we got a couple quick questions.